You talked about the dangers of growing power of the executive. In Rome, the power of the executive grew in direct response to war, internal crises, and deficits. I assume that there is a parallel. What do you propose be done about it?
I think absolutely the growing military of the power of the president is what I fear personally, because excuse me, it was when these Roman leaders such as Caesar had their own armies that the armies had loyalty to the leader rather than to the state, and they would follow them. So Caesar attacked Rome, and I think the president, while we don't have that same, Americans, our soldiers are more loyal to the state. So I don't see them following the president in that way. I do think it's very dangerous that the president can move troops. We haven't declared war since World War II, and he can do this without congressional declaration of war.
What can we learn from it? You're pointing out the problems. We have that history of Rome from which we supposedly can learn something. I think we all get the problem and agree with you that it is a problem. What does Rome teach us about what we can do about it?
I think an important thing to notice about the Roman Empire was also, as the executive, the military dictators usurped control, there was also a growing disparity between the classes. The plebeians were being just horrendously oppressed. They lost all their farms when they went to war, and when they came back, they were not able to repurchase them. I think the equality of American citizens and the education of American citizens is what is acting at the final check of our government. We see, as we mentioned in our opening statement, with the presidential term limits of the 22nd Amendment, this really just attests to that the American people are involved in their government and understand that the growing power of the executive can be dangerous.
I wanted to go back to one of the original part of the question, talked about the choice of a Republican form of government. A century earlier, before the Constitution, King James I had argued that only a monarch responsible only to God could guarantee the liberty of all of his subjects, great and small, which that seemed to be one of the concerns of the framers of the Constitution. Why did they not consider a constitutional and limited monarchy?
Well, Rome itself did begin with a monarchy that the monarch was elected, but he served for life, and I think it was really a benefit to the people that they moved to a republic, because they still got leaders like Tarquin the Proud, who was horribly immoral and with the rape of Lucretia really horrified the Romans that this was their leader. And we didn't want, in America, we had just come away from King George, who was mentally ill, and we did not think that a system that allowed that kind of leader was the best for us.
I agree. For the idea that a divine king, a king ruling with absolute sovereignty, a divine king, there's not enough protection to it. You have fickle people. People can they just don't respect. Like, as an individual, we put in institutional fail-safes in our Constitution. We have a president, not a monarch, and we try and prevent the kind of ultimate power that a monarch would instill.
And there was a debate. Your question brought up an interesting point. I mean, they did not know. There was a debate, and in the Constitutional Convention, they did not know which type of government they wanted to instill in Americans. They looked back to Greece with the democracy, and they feared the democracy because they believed it led to majority tyranny, and in the end, it led to a dictatorship and the oppression of the people. Also, as we mentioned with Jackson Elizabeth, with King George, they did not like the idea of a monarch because they had been oppressed with the taxes. And so a Republican form of government allowed the people to be represented, but the built-in system of filters, as Thomas Jefferson put in, were allowed to check this power of the democracy and majority tyranny.
Okay.
You know, I want to go back to this point that my colleague made about a monarchy. I'm sort of struggling a little bit to understand what's wrong with a monarchy, because an American historian, Gordon Wood, said that a republic derives its authority, and Madison said this in Federalist 39, from the legitimacy of the people. And so you live in a world where where polling is instantaneous. It's a world that didn't exist during Madison's time, and it puts enormous pressure on elected officials to focus more at times on polling rather than carry out the mandate upon which they were elected. And the Constitution says absolutely nothing about the impact of polling on elected officials. So when you look at the 21st century today, isn't democracy, isn't the Republican form of government a tougher one to operate than a monarchy?
I would have to disagree. I think the point that we made earlier in terms of that putting so much power in the monarch is giving up essential liberty for the result of temporary safety, which is If we give that up, we deserve neither liberty nor safety, which is what Benjamin Franklin said.
But I actually agree with you that monarchy is easier because you can just give all the powers to one person, right? But we have to have all of these institutions. I think the difference with the U.S. and the Roman Republic is that the Roman Republic had to trust leaders. They trusted people, where we have institutions. We have checks and balances between the branches, and we have impeachment, Article 1, Section 3, where we can pull back a leader.
And while I agree with Elizabeth that we do trust in our institutional fail-safes that the framers put up, I do think that we trust in the people as a whole. We do believe in the ability of the everyday citizen, which is the idea of the equality of America. And so while we don't put our trust into a military dictator, we do put our trust into our fellow citizens.
The argument in the Federalist Papers is that republicanism reflects the genius of the people. I wonder if you could talk to us about what the drafters thought the genius of the American people was, and how is it all that different from the genius of the people in the Roman Republic?
The Americans, coming out of the Revolution, had the British history. They had fighting with kings for rights, with the Petition of Right with Sir Edward Coke versus Charles I. We had the Magna Carta to look back to. They said these are these rights that we've traditionally held, and there's been this pulling away from the monarchy, and I think that taught the Americans over time how to have this republic successfully.
I think that our Republican government, by filtering people up into elected positions with Article 1, Section 2 and Article 1, Section 3, we're creating the genius of the people by electing those most intelligent, most able-bodied to serve.
Also, I think a direct contrast to the Roman Republic and the American citizenry in the colonial period was the Roman Republic, the citizens were obsessed with reputation and ambition, and with the globalization of Rome and the trading, they were obsessed with greed. They just wanted success and they wanted power. I think the American citizenry, we came over here, we were a nation of immigrants, and we wanted the rights of the individual people. It was not for ambition and for greed, it was for everyone and equality of the American citizen.